Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. This episode is brought to you by The Wellness Paradigm, a holistic health coaching company shifting the way that women understand and heal their bodies. Through bioenergetic testing, functional lab testing, and functional nutrition, we uncover what traditional approaches often overlook. So you can stop guessing, start healing, and finally feel like yourself again. No more one size fits all protocols, just real answers, deep rooted healing, and the clarity and confidence you deserve to feel incredible. It's time to shift the paradigm of women's health. Now, onto our show. Good afternoon, Kelly.
Hi, how are you doing today, Shannon?
I'm awesome. And I am so happy. I mean, Kelly and I were just chatting for a while before this, and it's already been an incredible conversation. But I'm so happy you're here, going to share some absolutely incredible insight that we are just really aligned on. And Kelly is a board certified holistic nutritionist, an alternative medicine practitioner, and an integrative healing practitioner. And, I feel like that barely scratches the surface of all of the things that Kelly really can do. But I will let you take the floor and tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey into getting into this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, probably like a lot of people, it was a baptism by fire. I was
Yeah.
Italian girl raised on pasta and veggies, and then got diagnosed with celiac in my early 30s.
Hmm.
And because so much damage had happened, I had actually ended up diagnosed with six autoimmune diseases and really ended up bedridden in my early 30s. I was paralyzed on my right side, looked like I had a stroke, and had this moment where I realized Western medicine was just failing me, which I think is not uncommon.
Mhm.
By the time I was 29, they started cutting pieces of me out because
Mhm.
they couldn't figure out why I was having the problems I was having. So I ended up with a hysterectomy at 29, and it
Wow.
didn't fix anything. So I look back and I'm like, oh, I wasn't healing right from any of those surgeries because I had autoimmune, and nobody thought to test me for autoimmune because I didn't fit the mold. I wasn't grossly overweight. I didn't have hair thinning. I just didn't present the way you would think. So I had this moment when I lost vision in my right eye.
Hmm.
I was like, okay, I have to figure out what's going on. And I was an IT engineer, so I have a very analytical mind. So I started devouring medical journals, which I fully understand a lot of people aren't going to do that. But I was like, how do you lose vision in your eye? And I ruled out all the eye injury stuff because I didn't have eye injury. And inflammation came up. And I was like, well, that's an interesting thread. Let me follow that.
Mhm.
What causes inflammation? And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a connection between what I put into my mouth and what happens inside my body. So I decided to shift away from Western and really step into Eastern and then
Mhm.
Chinese medicine. And they told me that this was the hand I had been dealt. I had to accept it and blah, 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 all the things. Wonderful gaslighting happens when you're a woman. And I started walking back the autoimmune diseases, which they told me wasn't possible.
Yep.
And it was a journey. It took years. I think
Mhm.
I probably 3 to 5 years was the window, and I was mostly symptom free, but to get into like full remission. And even now, I still have celiac, but I don't have nearly the reactions I have. I have so much more bandwidth. I can
Mhm.
actually have imported Italian flour and not have any kind of reaction. But it took about 3 to 5 years to really restabilize my body, which might sound like a long journey, but when you've got 3 decades of abuse under your belt, what's 3 to 5 years to actually get everything back? So
Mhm.
it really was out of necessity. I had a 2 year old and a 3 year old. My daughter still has trauma from realizing that mommy was shutting down. And that's what kind of pulled me out of the engineer world and into this holistic world, because once I got better, everywhere I looked, I was like, they're settling and they don't even know they're settling. Like, we're
Mhm.
kind of conditioned that this is just what aging looks like. This is just what menopause looks like. This is just what life after giving birth to a child looks like. And it's all dysfunction. And it's all things that we can do something about. We don't have to actually settle. But when
Mhm.
you don't know what you don't know, you accept it. So everywhere I looked, I saw people accepting things they didn't need to accept. And it pulled at my heart. And that's how I kind of began to uncover really what my purpose is, to just really help people, women exclusively, understand there are so many choices that you actually have, and you don't have to have this happen to you. You can become empowered and do something about it, and you can have your health look and feel how you want it to. And it doesn't have to be drastic overhauls. Like small, sustainable shifts are massive because healing is cumulative.
100%. Yeah, I went through my own healing journey with autoimmune issues, ankylosing spondylitis. They
Mm.
told me I was gonna, walk with a cane the rest of my life, which I was, and reversing it was not really something you did. It's medication
No.
your whole life. And I was like,
Yes.
nope, nope. And
Yeah,
I
and the medication doesn't make you feel great anyway.
no, I felt terrible. That was the thing, is
Yeah.
that was like I could walk a little better, but I was so tired. And I said, there has to be another way. Why is my body doing this?
Yeah. Well, it's
You
poisoning your
know,
mitochondria, right?
no,
I
well,
had a whole counter full of medications, and the solution was always a different medication.
always, always. And it was like, yes, I could walk a little bit better, but I still wasn't getting regular cycles. My gut was absolutely a mess. My fatigue was horrible. But you go
Yeah.
to all these different specialists, and all of them
And
don't.
never once look at the gut terrain.
Oh, well, girl, we could have a whole conversation.
You know?
The
It's
gut
the
microbiome.
foundation of your body's health. 70% of your immune functions in your gut. You're having a health crisis. Let's not look at that foundation piece. Let's just chase symptoms.
When for me, because we talked about that, I got into functional medicine because I did a GI map test and my symptoms resolved in 10 weeks,
Mhm.
about 80%. I ditched the cane. I was a bodybuilder for the record. Turned
Yeah, I
into,
did body sculpting.
oh, so fun.
It's
But,
kind of fun. We do intense things that we don't know we've got underlying dysfunction or damage happening in the body. And then you get to that tipping point and your body's like, I'm done.
legitimately, like, won the bodybuilding show. 2 weeks later, was crippled, walking with a cane, put on
Yeah.
15 pounds, in the worst shape of my, it was,
Yeah. Well, because we're putting so much
yeah.
pressure on our body and strain on our body, but we don't have those foundational pieces because we're not even aware we're missing those foundational pieces.
Oh, no. And nobody, like, I mean, that's part of a lot of this podcast. But,
Yeah.
I think one thing I'd love to tap on is, for me, when I did a GI map, which is a functional stool test, now I do a little more bioenergetic work, but like, that saved my life, legitimately saved my life. And I don't say that lightly because I was really in rough shape. But anyways, so I felt great. And then I continued diving down all this path of understanding more about functional nutrition and workouts and whatever. Um, but there's always a missing piece. And it really wasn't until I got more into the energetic healing side of things that I truly healed. And I know that's something you're passionate about, is understanding and supporting this kind of 40
Yep.
self. So I'd love for you to kind of go into that work.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You can do everything physical, mental, and emotional, but it doesn't feel sustained or stable long term. It feels like it's constantly work, it's constantly effort,
Yes.
constantly what's the next thing.
Or you're going to lose it all. You're going to go
Yeah,
mad.
yeah, yes. And it's not supposed to be so much work. So then what's the missing piece, right?
Mhm.
And you already touched on it, it's the four-dimensional self, right? The physical, the mental, and the emotional are reflections of what's happening in the spiritual or the energetic self. And
Love
this is not a religious thing, right? It's the fact that we are eternal, energetic beings in a physical body.
it. Mhm.
And everything, one of the things that I've received in my journey is that everything starts in the spiritual self and then ripples forward. So does it mean we don't have to deal with the physical, the mental, and the emotional? No, because we are eternal beings living in a physical body and we're called to be good stewards, like we talked about. So now that we have damage in the physical, we do need to plug those holes and give the body what it needs because it's intelligently designed. Once the body has what it needs, it can rebalance and it can heal. But if you want that to be lasting and stable and sustained and be in flow and actual balance where you're not constantly having to do the next thing, you have got to address that energetic or spiritual piece because that's the origin.
Mm. Now, for somebody that's listening, that's like, that sounds nice. Sounds interesting, right? I think you and I could probably agree. Like, that's for many people the hardest part of this healing journey, is understanding, one, what that means, how to get into it, but also finding alignment, because, spiritual, again, doesn't have to be religious. But
But
understanding,
our world's really polarized it, right? Like
very,
either you're new age and woo or you're ultra
yes,
religious, and neither one is actually true,
yeah.
right? We have too many labels, too much vocabulary that divides us and makes us divisive. if you even just change the word from spiritual to energetic, we have
Mm-hmm.
an energetic self. And if you're sitting there listening, thinking, I don't know if that's true, if you've ever sat next to somebody who was so angry you could feel it, you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling their energy. You're absorbing their energy. And like we were talking about, there's a whole new field of quantum cardiology that has defined our energetic heart field projects out in all directions 6 to 10 feet. So we're now getting science that shows this is real.
Mm-hmm.
It's the energy. Everything is energy, right? Like we know everything is energy, but we don't actually think about what that means. And if everything is energy and we're not supporting the energy,
Mm-hmm.
how is it going to stay balanced? How is it going to stay healthy?
Mm-hmm.
We do self care, and most people's self care is physical, mental, emotional. Most
Mm-hmm.
people are not doing anything spiritual or energetic for self care. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of the first things I learned when I kind of had this awakening, going from straight up clinical, analytical to now having this spiritual awakening, was I was tasked with doing one thing daily that brought joy to my soul. And I thought, well, I don't even know the things that bring joy to my soul. And then I'm crying because I'm like, oh my gosh, how disconnected am I actually to myself that I don't know the things that bring joy to my soul. And through prayer and meditation, I kind of discovered that if we can go back to the things that brought us joy as a child, now we're tapping back into the things that bring joy to our soul, our energetic, our spiritual self.
Mm-hmm.
Vocabulary is dealer's choice.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that start feeding the soul again, that feed
Mm-hmm.
that spiritual self. That's how we do that kind of self care. So for me, it was being outside in nature, being barefoot in the grass, playing with my puppies outside, looking up at the sky and just really marveling at all the intentional creation around us. I really connect to our creator. I use all kinds of words for that: God, Yahweh, creator, source, all of it, through appreciating creation. I love nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing things that actually brought joy to my soul again. And even though I was pretty progressed in my healing journey, I was like, oh my gosh, things that I thought this was how it is, they are now also restoring and
Mm-hmm.
repairing. And I'm having a different kind of energy and I'm having a different kind of perspective. And now I'm not getting triggered as much. And things that, our old wounds are now healing, and I'm not doing anything to heal them.
Mm-hmm.
And I started really understanding that we spend so much energy doing and we don't spend nearly enough time being.
All the time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was a huge early lesson for me. Was one, I have to let go and trust and stop doing. And I have to learn how to bring joy to my soul daily and just be.
Mm-hmm. We're human beings, not human doings, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But you realize as you start to support this spiritual or energetic piece, where you thought healing was is just the beginning, because now you start healing in ways that you don't really even have a vocabulary for, because you
100%.
start showing up as a whole, calm, balanced, healed person in
Mm-hmm.
ways that you don't even have to think about.
I love that you mentioned that too, because I think so often in the healing quotation world, it's black and white, A to Z, and it's like there isn't a quotation end, right? We're always
Right.
healing, but I know, me personally, and a lot of my clients, it's like, okay, you healed the gut issues. Amazing.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
the brain fog, the amazing, but there's so many levels deeper, and I know I personally didn't realize how many levels deeper needed to go until I
Yeah.
was doing all of this work that felt, I mean, I'll be uncomfortable. Like
Hmm.
this
Oh yeah.
spiritual work, whatever you want to call it, isn't always the most fun
Well,
and
it's
fun.
messy and it's brutal, and it has to be, right? Because the egoic self has to die
Yeah.
to make room for who we were actually created to be.
And that's something you can't, that's, especially being very logical, you can't explain it, right? It's not like, oh, you
You
no
have to
longer
experience it. You have
got
to
it.
choose to step
Like,
into it and experience it.
yeah. And that's
It's
going to
it's
feel
faith,
different.
right? It's faith.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you what, once I started doing the spiritual piece, I started noticing things like my kids. things that would trigger me before no
Yeah.
longer pulled me into a trigger. Or my husband, I love him so much, but he would get triggered and normally I'd get pulled right in. And I
Mhm.
started to notice that when they would get triggered, I could feel myself draw back and
Mhm.
hold space, not choosing to do this. It was just a response of my spiritual self to hold space and really communicate to this is a safe space for you to feel how you feel.
Mhm.
This, I understand, has nothing to do with me. This is your wound.
Mhm.
And I'm going to give you the space to process it. And I'm not going to add to the mess you're trying to untangle right now. And it didn't come out in those words. It came out as me holding space, me not participating in the trigger, me validating whatever they were saying so they could feel seen, heard, and understood. And none of this was a conscious choice. This was my, as I say it in my practice, is it was my soul being able to come to the foreground and drive so that my egoic mind didn't have to think through it and muck it up.
Mm. Yeah. That's so, and in order to do that, you had to release control too, because this is
A
really a
hundred
subconscious
percent. Oh my
thing,
goodness. The
you know?
control piece is so intoxicating, but
Oh.
it's poison. It's a beautiful poison. But once you wake up to the lie, you don't want it. Like my intention every single morning is to our beloved creator, more of you and less of me. I
Mm.
truly want as little of my egoic mind to remain as possible. Because the more we can let go of egoic mind, the more we can step into oneness and unity. And that's actually where living happens.
Mm. Yeah. Beautiful. Um, I think to kind of wrap things up, although we could literally talk for so long about all of this beautiful journey, but if somebody was wanting to explore these different dimensions, where could they even get started?
Oh my gosh, there's so many different ways to get started. You could simply do the exercise of what brought me joy as a child to
Hmm.
start thinking about where can you support your spiritual self and do that one thing a day. You can start with one thing a day. For me, it was literally going in my backyard with my puppies and just looking up at the sky and the clouds and being intentional about how it made me feel
Mm.
and the connectedness. That's what the awareness came to, is where do I feel connected to what is bigger than me?
Mm.
Because we are not meant to be individuals in silos. We are created in oneness, but this whole world drives separation. So if you can find, whether it's music or nature or singing or meditation, anything where you feel that connectedness, that you're a part of something bigger than you, I would say start with that. We always talk about you can't pour from an empty cup. But one of the things I was told in my journey is being a cup is not enough. You have to become the chalice and
Mm.
fill up your chalice. And from the overflow, you pour into others. So I think you start with really getting in touch with what brings my soul joy. And then you keep doing that consistently so that you can turn into a chalice. And then your chalice can overflow. And then from the overflow, you can keep growing and pouring out.
Mm. Love that analogy. Thank you. Well, if people wanted to understand more on the, awesome work that you do, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, they could visit my website, wellnesswarriors.care. Um, I have lots of different ways that I pour into people, and I have a lot of free information too, because with awareness comes choice. So I feel like you've got to start somewhere, and just by even perusing information that might be something that you've not considered from that perspective, it can start to open up and awaken different parts of you and your healing journey.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time and enlightening all of us with your story and your knowledge. And I will put the links for her social media and website down below so you guys can definitely go and, connect with her, follow her. Let her know if this you had a little tidbit that really stood out to you. And I'm sure she would love to hear. I'm sure I would love to hear too. And thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you on the next show.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Kelly.